give a quick background as to what conventions of states is trying to do, why it's important?
Sure. So Article 5 of the United States Constitution contains the ways that we can amend our Constitution. There are two ways. The first clause of Article 5 says that when 2/3 of both houses of Congress want to propose an amendment, they can do so. And then that goes out for ratification by 3/4 of the states. In convention in 1787, George Mason pointed out a flaw. He said, if we only give that power to Congress, then they're never going to propose amendments limiting their own power or tyranny. So he proposed we had a second clause, which they did unanimously without debate, that says when 2/3 of states desire to call a convention, they can pass applications or resolutions through their state legislatures. And when 2/3, or today 34 states agree, then the states can gather in convention to propose amendments. And then it goes back through the same ratification process. 34 or 38 states, 3/4 of states have to ratify. So today, Convention of States, our organization where I'm president, exists to promote a convention based around 3 subject matter areas, talking about, number one, term limits for Congress and for other members of the federal government, staffers, bureaucrats, the people we know as the deep state, judiciary. Number two, proposing fiscal restraints on the federal government, anything like a balanced budget amendment, tax caps or spending caps. And number three, scope and jurisdiction restrictions on the federal government, which would be broadly described as power restrictions on the federal government.
I really like that idea of term limits not being restricted to elected officials, but also every member of the federal government. I think some of us might have liked that for a certain doctor who was in charge of things the last few years.
Yeah, we call that the Fauci Amendment these days.
Oh, is that part of the Convention of States platform?
Yeah, you can limit bureaucrats, and I think this is really important. First of all, I mean, I think largely the administrative state is a constitutional abomination. It shouldn't exist. I don't think that the Congress has the power to delegate lawmaking responsibility, and they've done that. But in lieu of that, we have to limit their power, but we should also limit their terms. They were never intended to be unaccountable bureaucrats, unelectable, completely unaccountable to the people serving for 40 years. That's part of the problem, part of the disease in Washington, D.C. And yeah, you could, for example, impose a limitation and say nobody can collect a paycheck from the federal government in the bureaucracy longer than 12 years or 15 years. Pick your term.
And Mark, if I may, I'd like to add to that a suggestion that public unions, private unions are one thing. I mean, public employee unions, right? I think that's part of the problem. That's part of the entrenched bureaucracy that you're fighting against.
Yeah, not only do I agree with that, Robert, but look, the great conservative, I put that in air quotes, being ironic here. FDR said that public unions, unionization of public employees, was fundamentally incompatible with public service. It's outrageous that we even have public employee unions, and the only reason that we have them is they are chartered by the federal government, and we could absolutely in this convention make those charters unconstitutional.